Hey everyone, welcome into Sports in the Mitten. As always, my name is Thomas Bendit, and I'm with Adam Biggers to chat some Michigan State football. We're going to kind of sporadically have some sort of we'll call them special podcasts, whatever you want to refer to them as, but we're just going to tackle one individual topic here today, and that's specifically the reports that have been coming out as far as Michigan State potentially playing at night on the football field next fall. Adam, what have you heard about this, and what's kind of your initial take when you started hearing rumblings about this?
Is this not the second time this has happened?
Perfect.
Well, they can wait. I think it's just people. I think they're just people knocking on doors. Jehovah's Witnesses. No offense to any Jehovah's Witnesses, but yeah. I'm not Jehovah's Witness.
Bad timing.
So Anyway, basically, what I've heard is pretty much what's been put out there. It sounds like it might happen. I mean, it sounds like realistic. I think maybe a couple months ago, even last season, I remember when Dave Brandon, former athletic director at Michigan, was asked about it, and he was not for it at all.
Yeah.
But I mean, when did Dave Brandon ever have a good idea? So sorry.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I would like to see it happen, and it sounds like that it could happen. And I know a little bit of it had to do with why no night games last year, TV licensing, so forth. With Michigan and Michigan State, I do remember Dave Brandon did make a good point. Don't get me wrong. He said something to the effect of, with it being at night and an intense rivalry like that, you give them like all day to gear up. If you've ever been, to a Michigan or a Michigan State football game or tailgate, you know what's going on. So I mean, if it's a noon game, these guys, especially in East, they like to drink in East Lansing. They are oiled up, ready to go by like 9 o'clock in the morning. So I mean, I guess if you give, and I think that's probably true for a lot of schools with good football teams. So they're excited to get out there. You give it that whole. I like the idea of it being on prime time from a television standpoint. If I was a bar or a restaurant owner, I think that would be a big draw. But at the same time, like I said, Dave Brandon, his concerns were security, basically, and to put it in layman's terms, you get a bunch of drunk Michigan and Michigan State fans, and somebody says something, and next thing you know, you got a brawl going on, and they've had all day of drinking, which doesn't exactly make the situation any better. So there are two sides to this.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'd say my initial reaction when I want to say it was with Brandon. I don't think he proposed it, but someone asked him about potentially having a night game for Michigan State. And part of the context of the question at the time was, oh, what about Michigan-Ohio State? I'd start with, I think they're very, very different deals, those two games. Just starting with the fact Michigan State is played in like Thanksgiving weekend. It's always freezing every year. I think there was 1 year it was like 50. But Michigan State is played in, I think in a couple years, it's going to be in like September or something. But usually October, first couple of weeks of October, it moves around a lot. So I think it's a different aspect from there. Obviously the history of it is a lot different as well, but I was kind of hesitant towards doing it when I first heard about it. For some of the reasons you described. I mean, I've been to this game for a while running now, but certainly all the Michigan, the ones played in Ann Arbor, and yeah, people get pretty fired up for this one, not only in their interactions, but certainly with the old cup, I guess. I don't know what to refer to it as, but drinking all day and doing whatnot. But yeah, if you're extending this to like 8 at night when you kick off, I mean, certainly that all of that exaggerated, and you have a lot of other problems on the table. And I think one of the other things too, excuse me, but Ward Manuel has talked about this, but Michigan is one of the fan bases where it's not like even a majority of their fans are within like a 20-minute drive. Like a ton of people drive in. They either fly in for the weekend or they drive in for, an hour plus wherever, on the west side of the state, up north, or out of the state altogether. And the driving thing is definitely a concern, at least from the Michigan aspect. I'm sure to a certain extent it's the same for Michigan State. I assume a lot of the fans there come from the east side, which is not necessarily always the easiest to get to from the Lansing area. So I think there's those concerns, but I've kind of come around to it, to be honest. It's only one day a year. I mean, if you have some traffic problems or there are a couple unruly students because they had too many drinks, to me, it just sounds so fun. And I think it would just be such a great atmosphere that you just need to deal with those, like figure them out. That's kind of how I've come around. Are you on that side, or are you more of the concern side, I guess?
Well, I mean, there are valid concerns, and you mentioned what I was going to mention, the driving thing. So let's just say it's in East Lansing or it's in Ann Arbor, it's a late game, and it's not that far of a drive, and maybe people are like, okay, well, maybe I'll test it and make a bad decision. Whereas if you flip it, like if it were Ohio State, Michigan, I think there would be a less likelihood because Ohio State fans are traveling. So chances are they're probably coming up to stay. They're going to stay the night. They're getting hotel accommodations, that kind of stuff. They're in town. They don't plan on, hitting the highway that night. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot. And all it takes is a couple incidents and a couple bad apples, right? And it makes the whole thing like, oh, well, this was a horrible idea because there was a drunk driving accident and there were these fights. But I mean, let's face it, we face those same problems probably on every single game day somewhere in the country. I mean, and sad to say, but somewhere in the country, at a football game or on a campus or tailgating, someone's getting into a fight. I mean, I think anytime there's alcohol involved, you can see some of those problems. But at the same time, you can't assume that everybody's going to be irresponsible, because the vast majority of people, I think, are responsible. And maybe it is just a small section, and all it takes is a mistake. As far as a viewership atmosphere, I think night game, Michigan State does make sense. I think it'd be a huge draw. But at the same time, too, are we looking at, and I'm wondering if this kind of comes into play, too, are we looking at the same Michigan State team that won, 11 games in 5 of the 6 past years? I mean, realistically, if Michigan State's going to be on a decline and they start booking, these night games, we're just going to, I don't want to see blowouts in prime time. Put that on at noon. You know what I mean? I want to see a good game at prime time. So there's a lot to wonder there. But I do know that Ward Manuel said that it could happen, and he's the athletic director now, not Dave Brandon. So I'm sure that Ward has taken into account all the safety aspects. But I think at the end of the day, if we're seeing 2 good football programs going head to head in state prime time, I don't see a problem with it. I think Alabama and Auburn have played the Iron Bowl a few times that night. So
that's and that's something I wanted to bring up. The one thing I've heard a lot is that this is different from a typical night game, and part of the reason is the rivalry aspect of it, but the other reason is that both fan bases are close. I mean, how far is Ann Arbor and East Lansing? 90 miles?
63 miles. I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's nothing in the grand scheme of things. And it's the kind of idea that, well, if Michigan plays Michigan State, in Ann Arbor, a ton of Michigan State fans are going to just come up for the day to hang out and party. And I'm sure Michigan fans who don't have tickets to the game do the same thing. And obviously the inverse as well, if the game's in East Lansing. So the idea is, well, for Ann Arbor, where this game theoretically would be played, there's 110, maybe you add in the players and stuff, maybe it gets to like 120 people, 120,000 people in the stadium or so. But if you have 25,000 people coming in just to hang out and party all day, it turns into an entirely different atmosphere. But I agree. I mean, Alabama and Auburn have done this plenty of times. This is not like a unique thing. I mean, I think in this area it would be new. There'd probably be a transition period, so to speak. But I mean, you can't tell me that there weren't a lot of people who just came in for the day for that Michigan-Notre Dame night game a couple years back. Like, I mean, come on. Is it really going to be that much different? And there are a lot of people making these like crazy claims about, oh, well, you know, if Michigan has a night game, MSU people are going to vandalize everything and whatnot. And I'm just like, come on. There's going to be a bunch of garbage all on the ground because that's how it is after any huge game day. That's going to be about it. Maybe they spray paint. Like, I'm sure Michigan people will spray paint the statue. MSU people will spray paint the Michigan Rock. I mean, it happens every year. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I don't know if you're on board with that or not, but to me, it's kind of over exaggerated, and other people have done this. I think Michigan and Michigan State can do it.
I think the pros, if it remains, because I mean, right now Michigan is regaining a little bit of a foothold. Right, these past two games. I mean, that one in 2015, Michigan should have won that. You know, great play by the Spartans, Jalen Watts-Jackson on that. I mean, that was about as improbable as it gets. Last year in East Lansing, that was a little bit more decisive, and I think that I talked about this the other day on with Greg Eno on the Knee Jerks podcast actually last week, and I don't think it's where Michigan is back yet. But I mean, Michigan is certainly it's no longer okay. Michigan State's going into this, and Paul Bunyan is staying in East Lansing. Now it's real. Now it's, you know, now there's something there. I do think that Michigan is, at least if we're looking right now, just in a 2-year segment, I do think that Michigan has an advantage. I mean, I think Michigan will beat Michigan State this year. For all those reasons, a night game is appealing, and I think that the pros outweigh the cons, because if you do add in, you know, the extra people who come into Ann Arbor. I mean, if it's Michigan State, regardless of the location, there's going to be, you know, like you said, fan bases travel. But I mean, I can't see why, you know, the city of East Lansing wouldn't think that it was a good idea. I mean, it's going to be good for business. And then the same thing for Ann Arbor. I mean, you can't automatically assume that everybody's going to be drunk, ignorant fan and be you know, butthurt over a football game and then want to go and just vandalize stuff, because really anybody anywhere can do that. I mean, there's people doing that, you know what I mean? So I do understand that it gets magnified in a football rivalry. I do understand the concerns about it, but at the end of the day, I think it really relies more or less, as the Big Ten's cost. It's the TV. You know, it relies on TV and advertising partnerships and all that stuff. When are these games going to be played? So if the interest is there for a Michigan State night game, I think they'd be stupid to not do it. But I mean, if the interest doesn't outweigh all the potential setbacks and cons, whatever you want to call them, then you know, I don't see a reason to change it. But I mean, just from a pure fan standpoint, why wouldn't Michigan State at night be cool? I mean, I think a lot of people would want to see that.
Yeah, and I wanted to add one thing before we kind of jump into what it could mean, you know, for this year specifically. But I think one thing a lot of people forget too is, you know, as both of us, obviously, we go to a lot of these games live. You know, a decent hunk of the fan base, I mean, fair or not, they watch the games from home, and they're not in that environment on a week-to-week basis or whatever. And I think one thing a lot of people forget is, if you're a Michigan fan or you're a Michigan State fan, you want these huge environments to sell the recruits. I mean, like, I think one of the biggest transitions that nobody really talks about is, I'm sure you remember this, but a couple years ago, Urban Meyer was complaining about how the Big Ten did not want to play night games. And they seem to have this, I don't know, dislike of it, or just tradition of not playing that many. And the Big Ten has really kind of changed, and I think part of it is Urban Meyer just trying to have an influence on it. And, I mean, go look at the recruiting rankings on, like, 247 right now, and go look 10 years ago and see how the Big Ten compares. I mean, it's night and day. The Big Ten is just selling itself so much better. And I think a big part of that is, you know, you want Spartan Stadium filled, fans going nuts, awesome environment when your recruits are coming there. You don't want, you know, a noon game that everyone's kind of ignoring, so on. And the same is true, you know, in the Big House, obviously, as well. And to me, just ignoring that because of, you know, we're going to have some traffic problems or something, to me, I know there's more than that, but it's just kind of short-sighted when you think about, maybe it doesn't sway 10 kids to commit to your school, but maybe it sways one. Maybe it sways, that one quarterback that you need to win a couple extra games or whatnot. But with that, I did want to spin to how you kind of think it's going to impact this upcoming season specifically. I mean, I'm sure if this game is played at night, it probably is just a sign that, coming down the line, there'll be more of these at night. But for this year specifically, do you think it would have any impact, or you think it's going to go one way or the other, regardless of whether it's at night?
I'm just envisioning it from my end because I hate US 23. So now I'm starting to think like, man, that night traffic too. I don't know. Maybe they should just keep it at noon or 3:30. I don't want to deal with that crap. I don't think it'll happen this year.
You don't?
No, I don't. But then again, I've been wrong before. So if it does happen this year, though, I mean, it's a night game, so it's a different environment. Even though it'll be home for Michigan, night rivalry game, that ups the ante a little bit. I think that makes the schedule a little bit tougher. A night game with Michigan State, I don't think you can. I think it'd be more even. Now, if it's a noon 3:30, I mean, I have no problem picking Michigan over Michigan State through either scenario. But let's just play with it for a second. If it's a noon game, 3 o'clock earlier in the day, yeah. Night game, yeah, the stuff changes. You have all day, you're thinking about it. I mean, who knows? The night games can get a little bit tricky. So yeah, you factor in that with at Wisconsin, they're at Penn State, and I mean you still have, your traditional game with Ohio State at the end of the regular season. So, I mean, it's already a tough schedule. You begin at Florida or versus Florida, September 2nd. That's a 3:30 game, by the way. Michigan just announced that the other day. So against Florida in Dallas, that's a neutral site game. I think it's already a tough schedule. Night game versus Michigan State makes it just maybe just a little tap in the direction of being tougher rather than not so tough. You know what I mean? Maybe it's enough kind of push it over the edge a little bit. I don't know. It adds I'll use the word mystique. How's that? It adds mystique to the schedule.
I'd agree with that. Yeah. I mean, I think I kind of feel like it's going to happen this year. I mean, I don't want to read the tea leaves because I thought they were going to put Wisconsin at night last year, and they ended up just not playing a night game. But I think the fan base is kind of restless for a night game here. They've kind of gotten the taste with those Notre Dame ones, and then that Penn State game. And I think it's the only one that really makes sense when you look through the schedule. I mean, if you have the desire to kind of reserve the night games for a legitimate opponent, and I would think a rival would be a legitimate opponent because, I mean, you're not putting Air Force at night. You're not putting Cincinnati, the season opener, at night.
I hope not. Those are games that could be optioned, though.
Oh, I mean, it's certainly they could if they wanted to, but when you look through the schedule, nothing really makes sense as far as putting it at night, except for this one. And again, kind of understanding the idea that this game has never been played at night before, so it's a little bit different. But I mean, when you look through the schedule, I'm trying to pull it up here quickly, but nothing really pops out. Yeah, okay, so Cincinnati, Air Force, as you mentioned, Florida is not in the Big House, obviously. Then you get Michigan State October 7th, which is, as I said, relatively early. Rutgers is homecoming at the end of October. I mean, if you're putting Rutgers at night, it kind of speaks to the fact that you don't.
That's why I didn't travel last year. Michigan, Rutgers at night. I mean, I'm like, wow, this is just put them to bed, I guess. I mean, that was pretty. I'm glad.
And then you have your last two home games, Minnesota, which, I mean, you could make an argument, that they were all right last year. They got PJ Fleck. Maybe they'll have some momentum, but that is in November, which I'm sure every athletic department is hesitant to put a November game at night due to the obvious weather uncertainty. And then you have Ohio State, which I do not think they're going to put at night. I think that game will be at night eventually, which is a story for another podcast, I guess. But not anytime soon. I think that'll be a long time before they eventually pull the trigger on that. But I think it's going to happen. Long story short, excuse me. And I think it will have an impact on the game. And the thing, at least from my perspective, is, Michigan State's going to look a lot different than they did last year, obviously. Michigan is too. Both of them are bringing in a lot of new players, transitioning a lot of the roster. But I think Michigan State offensively is going to be a pretty solid team. I think defense, though, they're gonna have some serious challenges. And we'll certainly get into our season previews down the road. But I think that offense, the crowd noise is theoretically what affects you on the road. And I would think that crowd noise might give that offense some problems on the road if the game is moved tonight. But yeah, it will add mystique. There's no debating there. But yeah, any final thoughts here on the night game before we end this special podcast here?
No, but I am interested I think that we made some good points. I am interested to know what everybody else out there feels. So tweet us at Mitten Sports MI. That's the podcast, and a redesigned website coming soon, and it'll be through FanRag. And follow me on Twitter at AdamBiggers81. Thomas at T Bendit. Let us know what you think about the prospects of a Michigan State game. A good idea, bad idea. I think there's like we've just spent the past few minutes talking about. I think there are a lot of good reasons to have the game. I think there are some bad reasons to have the game. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, this is going to be a decision that I believe is mostly up to the league. I don't think that the Big Ten. I don't think that Michigan and Michigan State win it. Bottom line, I don't think that they have as much say as a lot of people think that they do. I think that the Big Ten is the one saying, okay, yes, we'll allow you to play a night game, not rather, okay, we're going to let you do it because you guys really want it. So, let us know what you think. Again, at Mitten Sports MI, that's the Sports and Mitten Podcast, at AdamBiggers81 and T Bendit, and that's Thomas's Twitter.